Welcome to the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries, where history meets prophecy. I am Elder Michael.
And I am Officer Charmaine.
Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this special broadcast. Actually, it's part two of the translation of the authorized version of the Bible. And we have some very exciting points to make today to help people to appreciate the value of this translation. Officer Charmaine, you may want to go first.
It's once again, just want to welcome everyone. This is going to be a fantastic session. If you haven't listened to the previous episode, please do that, and then you could come back to this one. And also make sure that you share these sessions as well with your friends and family. Remember that this session is interactive, so we really do look forward to reading your comments. So please comment as much as possible and like, share, as we said before. And we're going to have a great time.
Exactly.
Before we proceed, we're going to just give a little rundown of what we discussed during the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about history of the Bible, right?
Yes.
So, and we touched on, why people really don't read the Bible. And some of the things is that, it is not all true. There's many contradictions. It was written by a white man. It's whitewashed. It's used to enslave Black people. It's difficult to understand, in particular the KJV. So those were some of the reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we want to stress, and that is the King James Version of the Bible, the Authorized King James Version, should I say, is a collection of books written by the children of Israel, for the children of Israel, about the children of Israel. Exactly. And we've taken you through some of the basic elements of how the book started. And I think one of the most important things to remember is that our Father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, he was the one who gave the instructions to Moses, first and foremost, to write the instructions down for the children of Israel. And we also recognize that many of these instructions were, mentioned way before there was anything written down. And one of the key example is when Noah was going into the ark. He took into the ark, or the instructions that he was given was to take 7 clean animals and 2 unclean. And this automatically helps us to understand that people knew about clean and unclean before the Levitical laws. That's right. So that's one of the things to ponder everybody's mind.
Yes. It's a very important point, Officer Charmaine, because sometimes we get a narrow perspective. When I speak about the Bible, I see a tremendous manuscript. I look at it more like a portable library, as opposed to the book in the sense that it is used today. And I also see it as, you have a birth certificate, right? So I see it as it is our certificate of not only our birth as a nation, but also the purpose of that birth. And we'll get to that and expound it further as we move on. But I want individuals to see the hand of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob over the entire process. And at the same time, look and see his adversary trying to push back on making this translation a reality.
I think what you said is a really key point, because already we haven't even got to the actual writing of the King James Version of the Bible, and yet we saw the battle, and the battle is hot and fierce, and it continues to be hot and fierce. But just having a look and see, to see what happened with the King James Version and the battle that was ensued, that actually was against the book being written, you have more of an appreciation why this particular version is important to the children of Israel. There was
Uh, Another point that I like to make too before I forget is I used to discredit the English language previously, but now I have a lot of respect for the English language because the language, as you will see, is a mixture of several different national languages or dialects. There's Spanish there, there's French there, there's German, there's Latin, and we can go on and on. And that is important because what that says, it lays the foundation for
yes.
an international manuscript that is written and will be transferred all over the world. The point I'm making is this translation will change the world forever like it's never been done before.
And a couple more points. There are so many key points,
Yes.
and I'm probably going to miss a lot of them. But one key point is recognizing that the children of Israel were once upon a time in England
Yes.
during the time of Oxford University when that was being established.
Right.
And they came along with William the Conqueror
Right.
during the time of the Battle of Hastings, when he won the Battle of Hastings, and they took over England, and then they were given many places, but especially Oxford. And there's records that actually show that they were there, and they were actually kicked out of England before the Inquisition. I'm sure some of them were there, they managed to assimilate within the communities roundabouts. But that's one important thing to remember.
Right.
And another important thing to remember is that there was the Magna Carta, which was also a documentation that has a, should I say, a profound impact on the Bible, but more so
On the society that
on
produced the Bible.
society.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So England and the United States, they both have rules, regulations, charters, what have you, which are based on the Magna Carta. And you imagine these guys, our forefathers, coming into England during this time, and shortly after that, they're bringing their work with them. And shortly after that, the Magna Carta is established.
Right.
Right? And then hundreds of years later, it's used again to establish the American Constitution. So it's very important to see how we played a silent role in the foundation of these nations.
And that silent role, even though we get no recognition for it, helped to lay the foundation for the British educational system and the American educational system. All of
Yeah.
this, again, if you see the hand of God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, over
Yes.
the process, moving, and then his adversary pushing back, like I said. The reason we got into, like you said, into England in 1066, but then we were gone by 1290, 92 or something like that. Like, and we've done so much for Britain in such a short space of time. The question
Yeah.
begs itself, why were they kicked out so soon? Now, you have to see the hand of the adversary. Remember, I like to say this is what we do is not a black versus white situation. It's a
Right.
truth versus the lie and the
Yeah.
battle that ensues as a result of that.
So leading up to where we left off last time, we
Yes.
spoke about some of the individuals that were actually guided in writing segments of the book,
Yes.
such as Wycliffe. And we look at individuals like this because their deaths were horrific. I mean, poor Wycliffe, he died, and then 44 years after his death, the church, that's the Catholic Church, they dug up his bones, burnt them, and scattered the ashes in the river. So this was like, they just accused him of heresy. He was just terrible. He was just the enemy. And that was because of his writings. And the Catholic Church at the time was really against anyone writing the book or anyone owning the book. And
Right.
this you see leading to the Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition came shortly after that, a few hundred years after that. And again, the idea that any Israelite, because when you really look at it, the Spanish Inquisition really was against the Israelites that were practicing and was not adhering to the church's traditions. Exactly. And then after that, we had William Tyndale. And again, he was he did his version, and he was strangled and burnt at the stake. And you think to yourself, these guys, all they were doing was trying to write this information and send it out so that the people can understand. And it's not just any translation, it was the translation to English.
Right.
Remember, there were other countries in the world that were doing different versions of their translations, for example. But these guys in particular, doing the English translations, they were battered, they were brutalized, they were hanged. Even when they died, they were still dug up. And,
Right.
you just think about this. This is like, you see how much the other side do not want us to know who we are.
But not only that, Officer Charmaine, you see how much the other side knows about
Who
us.
we are.
And I always like to tell people, Elder Shadrach, our master teacher and founder, was not the first to know that we were Israelites. He was the first to do something about it. The Christians knew, the Muslims knew, the Khazars knew, the Freemasons knew, and they all tried to keep us down, keep us in our place. But Elder Shadrach lifted us up, and he, of course, had to face a battle in that process. And here we have the same thing with
we
James.
have a battle today. Yes.
Yes. And all of this is because the word of God had to be magnified. The God of Israel knew his people were going to go into captivity. He knew who was going to bring them into captivity. He knew the new Egypt had to be established. He knew the source of that. All of this is part and parcel of this big picture that needs to be understood before someone just discount the scriptures, the Bible, and say, oh, it's written by this and doing all that foolishness. This is a particular script that is necessary to be understood in order to appreciate the world that we live in.
Yes, we had a comment earlier from Pansy saying that she loved your comments about the truth versus the lie, which is so, you can't deny it. You can't deny it. But
like I said, Elder was the first that taught that to me, and he wrote the book, The Truth, the Lie, and the Bible. Listen to that. The truth, the lie. I didn't even think about it until now. I'm glad she brought that up, But this is exactly what we're trying to get at. We're trying to show people that if you turn on the media, and this is what I told my little 11-year-old friend yesterday, who was so wise. I was appalled at his wisdom. And I told him, this is not a black versus white. It's the truth versus the lie. And once we come out of that social dilemma that we are faced with, we could get to a bigger and better picture and understand the steps that have to be taken. So if we look at it from the perspective of slavery that is coming, right? Because at this time it didn't happen yet. We have to have a transcript that will declare to not only the slaves, because remember, the slaves, when they were bought and they were sold and then bought. So once you buy something, it becomes yours. But in this case, the God of Israel did not relinquish his authority, his ownership of our foreparents. So we had to have documentation. You couldn't go into a court of law and say, well, this is my son, this is my daughter. Well, where's the proof? Show me your birth certificate with your name on it. And here, the scriptures represent that birth certificate. And when they cut off the slave ship in Virginia, okay, we know exactly who we are and whose we are. Now we're under a specific authority. Even though the punishment would last for 400 years, we still did not change from being under that covenant. So coming to an understanding of that aspect is huge for understanding why the Bible was translated in the English language.
Yes, and you know what, that is such a absolute key point. For those of you who just joined us, we are doing part 2 of the history of the Bible. And if, like I said before, if you haven't watched part 1, please do so. And, you can also watch this one again. But there's just so much. It's just so incredible how things are set up. And you think about some of the challenges we have today, as you mentioned, Elder Michael, such as people trying to change the words within the Bible. Exactly. And you know what? You will see later on some of the I don't know, some of the nonsense that actually goes on. But you imagine when our forefathers were doing this hundreds of years ago, the simple Greek translation didn't have this kind of nonsense that's going on today.
Right.
People just wanted to know, just turn it into the language that we can actually understand. And now people are taking the words within the book and they are doing all kinds of messed up things, complete corruption. But you'll
Right.
see this later on. Even in the versions you think of are clean or as clean as can be, you'll see that there is corruption.
That's
But
right.
one thing I
So
wanted to point out,
yes,
you have the King James version of the Bible, which people are always trying to change, yet still you have the works of Shakespeare, which was written around the same time, and nobody tries to change it.
exactly. Uh,
So just
Now you
thinking,
mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier, Officer, I mean, there was a 40-year period where there was a lot of challenges. I like to think of this as the battle against the gates of hell,
mm,
right? And the Vatican is supporting the gates, right? The Pope has the key, of course, and
yeah,
we, of course, are promoting the word of the God of Israel. There's a comment there. The God of Israel is the master architect of all things. His
yes,
plans always come to fruition.
amen,
Exactly.
amen. It will
He's
happen.
the great designer, and
Yeah,
there's nothing greater than the design that he put on man and woman. So
exactly.
that's how it is. Now, so I like to say in that 40-year period, I timed it between 1378 and 1417. There was a great schism within Christianity, and it weakened the authority of the Vatican tremendously. And during that time, there were two rival popes, one in Avignon, which is a French city, and another, of course, in Rome. So
Mm,
right there was a little bit of a dispute to begin with. Then there was the invention of the printing press in 1454. Then we
mm,
had the European discovery that started in 1492, discovery of North America, for example. And
mm,
then we had the printing of the first New Testament in Greek that occurred in March of 1516. And most
right.
importantly, there was in October 31st, 1517, we had the beginning of I like to call it the Reformation, with Martin Luther in Germany, where he challenged the Vatican and the popes with their
Yeah.
authority.
Hmm.
That's like the prelude to what's going to happen right now.
Yes.
Yes,
And then after that, the William Tyndale situation.
right.
So
And now
yes.
let's look at some of the
So,
Vatican's attempt to push back on
oh,
this. You want to
you want
do
to go
that
there?
now?
That's kind of later on.
Okay.
If we can, well, let's go according to the slides because that will give help
Oh
to
yes, I forgot
our
this slides.
conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go to let's start from page 20. Well, page 21, let's say.
Okay. Let's go to that.
Let's go to page 21.
Yes, go ahead.
So, and the reason why I want to start here because something key happened, and Elder Michael, jump in anytime just to
Yes.
put that out there.
Mhm.
And one day we will do the whole history of the Catholic establishment, the organization,
Right.
Christianity, how that came into play,
Yes.
and what that actually meant. But just to give you a very brief synopsis, once upon a time, the church was basically the ruler of the world. Well, it still is kind of,
It is exactly.
still is. But they were the rulers of the world, so much so that they decided who were going to be the ruling monarchs.
And what we
Monarch
could do, Officer
in,
Charmaine,
in Europe, right?
just
So if
just
the
a
Pope
point.
didn't choose you, you were nothing. You can't call
Yeah.
yourself king, queen, baron, whatever. The Pope had to choose you in order to become the king.
One point I wanted to make is to our viewers to look at those those series on television, Game of Thrones, and so forth. And there was one on King James as well. I haven't seen it in a
Mm.
while, but those they all have knowledge that could be very constructive in helping to understand what took place at that time. To your point,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's so key because we take this thing lightly, and that's why we would look at something like the Magna Carta and know that It is still in effect today. Nobody
Exactly.
talks about it. Nobody really, refers to it, but it's still in effect. There was something called the divine rights of kings. And this is basically because, they all believed that, the Pope, with his divine wisdom or whatever it was, that he decides, who is closest to God, or, because he's supposed to be the representative of God. And it was just, it's really disturbing when you really read it.
To his credit, though, to his credit, he never said which God. So let's leave it there.
Yeah, well, okay, yes, but regardless, he's put himself in that position as, the authority of God. So even when you're in the church, when you marry and everything, it's by the power invested in him. So he is this so-called God with a small g, right?
Yes.
As I said before, it was him that actually, or the Pope that actually decided who was going to be the rulers. So the rulers of Spain and Portugal, England, France, Germany, wherever, he, or the Pope, the seat of the Pope, was the one that decided these rulers. And that's why it was, remember, before this, they did not want the book to be written. So this was something that, there was something hot and heated already going on.
Yeah.
And
There's a
then
question there.
comes, yeah, sorry.
It says, are there any historical inconsistencies in any of the translations that conflict with the 1611 King James Version? I wouldn't, well, I don't know because I haven't read them, but I imagine the book itself is a conflict. And and we will get to that later too, but just to respond to the question right now, I believe that because the gates of hell failed in their authority to accomplish the task of preventing the translation, they resorted to the what do you call those again? Knockoff versions. So they
Yes.
put knockoff versions to conflict with the accurate version so as to confuse the reader, to confuse the people.
I wanted to throw this out there
Yeah.
later on, but I might forget even. But remember, there was a battle to get the King James version, and the Catholic Church did not want that version out. They did not want it so badly that, to the point whereby, when they could not stop the writing of that version, they started to flood the market with other versions.
Exactly.
But we will get to the
yes.
the corruption of those versions.
Definitely. And thereby they were able to confuse the public.
Yes.
So that now, they spent a lot of money to put them out there, but people don't understand, because people think, oh yeah, we're upgrading the language from the old English to the common English. Like, that has nothing to do with it.
No, I'm telling you, there's corruption there as well, but we'll look at some of those later.
Okay. So you were talking about Henry VIII. You want to go back to that?
Henry VIII. Yeah. So this is where some of the issues started. Well, the issue started on a more political level. Right. So you got Henry VIII. He's requesting a division from the church, from the Catholic Church, and
but before that, he wanted to separate. He wanted to have an annulment, as it says here, of his marriage, and the Pope declined. So in response, they kind of took him out, excommunicated him, and what he did, he said, "Forget the Pope. I'm going to be the head of the British Church," right? And so thereby started that big conflict. He put himself up and pushed the Pope out.
Yes. Yeah. And by doing that as well, he set himself, or he was set up as the head of the English Church, as you said, and likewise, he was excommunicated from the Roman Catholics.
Right. So something had to be done to bring the British system back under the papacy, back under the authority of the Vatican, and at that time they had the what you call those guys, the Jesuits, and Jesuits.
So that's the next slide. Yes, the next slide.
Yes, go ahead.
So the Catholic, that was 1533, and in 1534, the Catholic Jesuits were established. Go ahead.
Now, one of the things we want to point out today, when we hear about Jesuits, people think of as a different class of priests, Catholic priests. But that's not
Right.
always the case. Some of them are priests, some of them are college professors, some of them are police officers or people in different establishments. They're everywhere. Some of them are CEOs of major corporation. The point is, this is a secret army of the Vatican, and they will do anything to defend Catholics' integrity. If you can, well, don't want to use that word because they don't go together, but to defend the Catholic political establishment. And one of the things that they did, they were in Spain, and they initiated a way to attack England
Mm-hmm.
and destroy the British. They wanted to turn, or rather, to give Henry VIII some kind of response that would destroy or prevent any other monarchy from trying to go against their authority. So what they did, they planned what we called the Spanish invasion, a way to go into Britain with ships and destroy the English people. They had 131 ships
Mm-hmm.
with over 30,000 of members in those. And they went into Britain to destroy not only the monarchy, but obviously to put in place a system that is more conducive to the Vatican. On July the 22nd, I think it was 1588, that's when the Pope launched a naval attack against Britain, known as the Spanish Armada. They had superior weaponry and an awesome military strength with missiles that could just wipe out the whole place. But here's what the British did. The British came back under the cover of darkness. They sent a few ships out with bombs in them and fire, and those ships were able to attack on their own, really, basically, the Spanish Armada. And after that, a wind arose from the ocean and wiped out most of the remaining Spanish ships, to the point where the British people thought, wow, this is an act of God, because obviously they couldn't have done it themselves. It reminded me of what happened yesterday here in Toronto. That wind, that rain,
I
everything.
heard that's crazy.
Yes, it was more than crazy
Yeah.
yesterday, but it scared me actually. Today we have trees all over the place, so like a tornado. We have electrical wires down and buildings torn apart because of what transpired. So again, this attack came. I call it a natural attack that destroyed the Spanish ships,
Yeah.
our army. So it destroyed nearly half of the Spanish fleet. It destroyed about three quarters, 75% of their army, putting the Catholics right back in a deficit situation. And the Jesuits, of course, will have to come up with a new plan, which they did. So if you want to say, go ahead on this.
Yes, yeah, well, and you know what, that actually happened during the time of Queen Elizabeth I. But prior to that, and then this is really quite crazy, because you look at all these different monarchies,
Right.
some were Catholic, some were Protestants, or some were neither. But you can see that this battle, even though it seemed like they were raging among themselves, it was really against us. So much so that even during the time of Queen Mary the First, does anyone know where the term Bloody Mary comes from? Am I swearing when I say that?
No,
Anyway, yeah, the term Bloody Mary. Do you know where that came from? Well,
yes, they don't know, but I know.
Mary the First, yeah, Mary the First, known as Mary Tudor, she went out on a killing spree, and that's what I'm going to call it, a killing spree. She went out there slaughtering people that were not Catholics, right? So yeah, her reign
That
was just
that
terrible.
perspective came from the Reformation. Now that you have the Protestants, because
Yes,
now we
it,
know
the other
that
side, right? Yeah,
exactly,
the
exactly,
other side. It was like this bloody battle, and this is
right.
all about Israel. This
Yes,
battle just kept going on and on.
yes.
And of course, you had shortly after that, you got Spain and Portugal and the Spanish Inquisitions coming through. And, then they were rounding up all the Israelites and slaughtering them. This was in 1580. That's the next slide. Is it the next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, the one after that. Yes.
Mhm.
right? So again, we spoke about the Inquisition and what was happening in Spain and Portugal. If you want to go back to that video, you can review that as well. But
Yeah.
again, this was an attack on the Israelites. You see how it's happening, she's in power, and shortly after that, the Israelites are being attacked again ruthlessly, bringing all these different systems into play, such
Well,
as position.
also the fact that the Vatican is trying to prevent the translation is a direct attack on the Israelites, even though
Right.
we did not have the means at that time to make that. I mean, we had made the original translation back in North Africa, but now this is another level,
Yeah.
a higher spiritual level, and
Right.
we now are going to go into a deficit situation. But the God of Israel is using whomever he chooses. Remember last time we said Solomon took Hiram to
Mhm.
and his workmen to help him build a temple. Once that
Mhm.
temple was built, then it was overlaid with gold, and that's
Mhm.
what is important. So James have been selected to
Mhm.
build the new translation, if you will, and once
But
that's done, we will be the one to use it to teach at the
but
appropriate.
you look at King Solomon. I'm looking at you have Joseph, you have Daniel. I
Yeah,
mean, these you have Esther. I mean, these were key Israelites put in these positions. But then you also had people like Nebuchadnezzar, and you
yes.
had Darius. And
So
these
that's a
guys
good
were,
point.
yeah,
That's a
these
good
guys
point you're
were.
making.
The
What
God of Israel really used them. He
what
even
you're
called
actually
Nebuchadnezzar
saying
his son.
is there's
So
a pattern that
right.
has to be noticed,
And it
and
happens
we
so
have to
many
follow that.
times.
Yeah,
And you even mentioned Thaddeus Stevens and John Brown. They too were used. These are not people that look like the children of Jacob, but they worked to help us.
right.
In so many different ways. And the
That is
same.
why
You
we
see the God of
say,
Israel's hands
yeah,
in this political
that is
power.
why we say it's not about black and white. It's about the truth versus the lie. And we go now to the next stage because we have to look at the gunpowder plot, right?
Okay, but before we get there,
Yeah.
okay, it's important to see, as we mentioned before, that the Catholics, they're realizing that they
They're
can't
losing.
control the writing of these books.
They're
So
losing.
in 1582, we have the Catholic Jesuit Bible. Okay, sorry, one sec here. We have the Catholic Jesuit Bible.
You have a copy of it?
No, I don't. But the Jesuits, they were established. They had their places of learning, and what do? They started writing their versions. So this is where you got the Reims and you got the Dewey, and known as the Dewey Reims
Right.
version of the Bible.
Exactly.
And this book came out 1 year before the King James.
Right.
So that's something
So
to pay
so
attention.
now that we have all these different versions and none of them are meeting the grade or meeting the standard that is required, and the Vatican recognizes the fact that they're not winning this battle against the truth, and their lies are not cutting it, they decided on another tactic. First, the Spanish Armada, they lost that battle. Now they're
But
going to use
before the
more.
okay,
Go ahead.
before the Spanish Armada, that just I like to look at it in this like in
I know you don't
sequential.
have a lot of
Right,
time. That's what I was.
right, okay, but just before that, in 1604,
Yeah.
King James himself commissioned the book to be written. Okay, so from this, he took the translators, which were either influenced by Israelites or were Israelites, and they were the one that were chosen. There were 54 of them,
Right.
and the 54 were separated into 6 groups, and the 6 groups were split: 2 in Oxford, 2 in Cambridge, and 2 at Westminster.
Right.
And it took 7 years to complete the 1611 King James version of the Bible. This is from 1604 to 1611. So 1611, 7 years, and this one especially for Elder Castrilli, who loves to collect these kind of numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So
So in the process, the
yeah.
Vatican launched an
Oh,
attempt.
and sorry,
Yeah.
And each book had to pass 14 different tests before it can actually make the final manuscript.
Right.
So think about the process of that
Yeah.
one book, the 1611 King James Version of the Bible.
Right. And so
Okay.
the Catholic launched their attack, and what they did, they used the Jesuits to infiltrate now the British system. Before, they infiltrated the Spanish system. Now they're infiltrating the British system because they are Catholics and Protestants. Protestants were called Anglicans and so forth. But the point here is we're going to have an attack now from within Britain as opposed to from without. And the idea was to blow up the Parliament building and kill James, his family, and some of his ministers, and so on and so forth. And they brought 36 barrels of gunpowder, dug under the Parliament building, and placed the gunpowder in position. And this was supposed to be launched. This attack was supposed to be launched on November the 5th of 1605. They got everything in place, but then before the explosives could go off, they were discovered and arrests were made. There was one gentleman called Guy Fawkes who was the one in charge in Britain on this thing, along with the Jesuits, and he was one of the core conspirators. However, they arrested all these people. The battles ensued, and people died. And they were those that were arrested were executed after trial. I think there was one Jesuit that got away, but the majority of them either died through the battle that ensued or were executed after their trial. The Jesuits, as we said before, was a secret Christian society, just like the Freemasons today. And they were able to interfere since 1540 in all the political and cultural affairs of all the nations on the which the Christian, and even some that didn't have Christianity, they were able to do it in order to reverse or try to push back on the Protestant Reformation that challenged the Vatican and their authority. So they were able to do these things and kill a lot of the people of not only Spain and Britain, but even throughout the world today. People die, you don't know exactly how it happened. The point is, this effort to put the lie in place of the truth is still ongoing. You may call it racism today, you may call it whatever. I mean, now you turn on the news, yeah, but it is still there, and we have to be aware, otherwise we'll fall into that trap.
Yes, no, absolutely. And, you know, and this is why I say that I sometimes marvel at, when you think about our elder, he brought this work into fruition some 40 odd years ago.
Yeah.
You know, us returning back, the children of Israel returning back to their God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And even in doing that, in the very first book, the same book you mentioned, Elder Michael, The Truth, the Lie, and the Bible, he
Yes.
writes about the King James Version of the Bible, why we use this version, and, we take it for granted, but it is when you look at the history that actually went into developing this book, you would have such an appreciation for that version of the Bible.
That's right.
And, even going back to what you were saying, even looking at the book, you can see that it provided a degree of inspiration even to King James himself, who took the colors of our flag. The
Yes.
colors, he took our colors and established the great flag.
Yes.
And that's a huge point, because the funny thing is, you have our people looking at those colors and saying, oh, those are the enemy's colors, and they will stick to colors that the God of Israel has never mentioned. They claim that they read the book, but they don't use the red, white, purple, blue in anything they do. They use the green and yellow, and it's what is that?
Yeah.
And you got someone who's supposed to be on the other side, who's taken our colors and have
But
used it
you
to
know
their
what?
betterment.
Even the guy who used the green and the yellow and the black or whatever it is, he too was a Christian. So my point though is
Yeah.
the lie has a whole array.
Propagated.
Yes.
It's propagated and
Yeah.
morphed into so many different
Right.
looks that it confuses us. It confuses people in general.
That's right.
But the beauty is, everything is written in this book, which was translated in English for the children of Israel that would one day learn English as a common language. And the most incredible thing is, English is the most widely spoken language in the whole entire world. Everybody, every corner of the earth you go to, people are learning how to speak English. If
That's
they
right.
don't know it already, they are teaching their children, their children's children. They are learning how to speak English, And the funny thing is, I've traveled so many places, and there are people like myself who travel, and we don't know the language of the countries that we go to. And very seldom do we try to learn those language. But then we find an easy way out because there are so many people that speaks English.
Yes.
So the God of Israel, he knew this was going to happen. And
It's
so before
amazing.
people went into slavery, 1611, when the book was finally authorized, from that time, a few years later, 1619, the first ship
Slavery.
went
Slavery
to,
kept in.
yes,
And
the
this is
first ship
why
went to
we say
Virginia.
it was necessary to have that translation
It
prior
was,
to the slaves arriving in the New Egypt, because then we had legal evidence to
yeah,
substantiate the ownership of the
yeah,
slaves. And the God of Israel never relinquished control. He never relinquished that ownership. And even today, if you look at the world, you could see unfolding a situation that I like to call an era of judgment. Because I mean,
mhm,
we're not going to get into it now, but there's a lot going on in the world today that lets you understand that those that had at hand in our enslavement are paying a big price and will continue to pay a bigger price. But the
yeah,
important aspect is that Bible, that authorized King James Version, established the identity and the responsibility of the slaves, regardless of what people will say about us. The God of Israel says otherwise, because it was ready at Jamestown, Virginia in
yeah,
1619, like you said, Officer Charmaine. And at that time, there was no United States of America. It was
yes.
all called Virginia. From Canada at the border to Florida, it was to the Mississippi River, it was Virginia.
But look at this as well, Elder Michael. Remember the Catholic Church, they could not stop us from, or the Bible, they could not stop the book from being printed.
Right.
So as we said, they went and they flooded the market with their own versions.
But
But on top of that, not
yes,
only did they sanction our slavery, one of the key points of our enslavement was that we were not allowed to read or write.
key.
Now, the most diabolical thing is, if you are saying that these people are less than human, why would you be afraid of them reading or writing? Why would you be
See,
afraid of
they're
them
not
picking
making
up
that
the book?
public. They're not
Right,
making that comment public. They keep
right,
that to themselves, but they're putting
right.
something else out there.
Exactly. They're saying that, oh, you guys, you're stupid, you're less than human, whatever,
Right,
but you're not
right,
allowed to read and write.
right,
So, you don't tell your dog or cat not to read or write.
right.
You know,
But here's
people
the
know they
interesting
can't
point.
do that. You know they can't do that. So you're not going to tell them that. So
Right.
why would you put it out there?
Yeah.
But
Here,
I have to finish this.
go ahead.
Not, if you were caught reading or writing, it was not just a matter of being spanked on the hands or being told off or time out.
Mhm.
You were brutalized. You sometimes had your eyes poked out or your tongue cut, or you being whipped to the your skin's peeling off your back. This is how bad, this is how terrible
Yes,
reading and writing was
yes.
for
And not
the
only that,
for the child of Jacob, for an Israelite
right.
to go to learn to read about his family, his forefathers. This
Now
is how it
we
was.
we had a situation then, if you look at the progress of it, the British came into North America. They helped to establish Canada and the United States. Initially, they didn't have in the United States, the Catholics didn't come in. They were mostly Protestants, but the Catholics found a way to get in. How? Notice that America had what they like to call a civil war. I always have a problem with that because I see nothing civil about war. I think it's stupid, but that's just me. But they had a civil war, and in that process of establishing a civil war, the Jesuits found themselves back in or into the United States in a strong way for the first time because they put the American against the American, the North against the South, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're in, and no one can get rid of them. You can see the results of that today. And I think that's important that people understand that within Christianity, you have these two different aspects that are fighting. They have some kind of friction, and they still haven't released or let go of that as of even today.
Even before the Civil War, I just wanted to point out another gentleman that had such a profound effect on our existence, even though we don't know that. And his name was Cromwell. And the funny thing is, there was this gentleman is Oliver Cromwell. Even his father, Thomas Cromwell, went through a similar situation whereby even after his death, he was actually, this was his great uncle Thomas Cromwell. Even after his death, the body was dug up. Again, okay, I'm just going to read off what we have here. So Cromwell, 1631, Oliver Cromwell believed that much of England was still living in sin and that Catholic beliefs and practices must be fully removed from the church. So this is part of his act. And this is the same thing that his great uncle believed, Thomas Cromwell. And his great uncle was very close to Henry VIII, and he was eventually executed. So poor Thomas Cromwell, okay, under his leadership, King Charles I was executed. And this is important because after this, they were trying to demolish the whole monarchy, right? And bring in or usher in a republic. So you would know, if anyone knows or doesn't know, England was once upon a time a republic, right? And known as the Commonwealth. Most of the countries that are subjected to England are known as the Commonwealth, right? And so after his death, his body was exhumed from Westminster Abbey. And this was on the 12th anniversary of the execution of King Charles. And again, his body, what they call a posthumous execution, whereby they take the body to re-execute the body, right? So his body was hanged in chains and his head was cut off, and it's just crazy what these people go through. They are so angry at,
the success of the Bible.
Right, the success of what was happening. But because they couldn't stop it at the time, they go and they desecrate the body itself.
I want people to put it in perspective, though. I want them to see how Lucifer will spare no expense to get his effort, his wanting to overthrow the God of Israel. He had this from almost the beginning in his heart, and all of what we're describing is his strategy to really control the minds of the individual to the point where they would stop believing in the creator of heaven and earth and put their trust in him. And this is why we say it's a matter of truth versus the lie. And don't let anyone tell you that the Bible is the King James version is whatever. We have to understand that this is the foundation when it comes to the spirit of the world. And this is what was translated from our holy scriptures for our benefit, for our edification, and for the glory of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That's what we need to do. Yes.
And thank you to Thomas Glover for
thank you, Thomas.
donation. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes.
But I completely agree with you. And that's, to me, is the pureness, the cleanness. When you see that all the other versions, many of the other versions, there were verses omitted, there were whole books that were omitted, there were actually books that were added. I remember years and years ago when I first came into Israel, someone said to me, "Oh, you're reading the Bible? Oh, you the King James version? You need to read the real book. When you find the book of the Maccabees, then you tell me." And I'm like, "Well, you know what? I need to understand first and foremost what's written in front of me before I go running to look at any other book." And the funny thing is, you need to question yourself why
Yeah.
those books, regardless. I mean, sometimes you saw them, sometimes they were removed. They were there, they were removed. But there's a reason why it never made the final cut.
Right.
And that's because there were problems with it.
They
Not so
didn't meet
much
the
problems
standard.
as,
They didn't
you
meet
know,
this high level
but
standard.
it did not meet the standard of what
Yes.
we needed to understand. The language was slightly different, the way it was written was slightly different, the timeline was slightly off. So the books never made the cut. It didn't go through the criteria of the 14 in
Right.
order to make the cut. You
So
imagine each one of them, 14 points that they had to pass in order
right.
to get to this point, and it didn't make it.
It's a good point you're making, but we want to bring it to today because the same thing is happening today. We
Mm.
see that today we have certain people, they use the name Israelite, but they follow the Christians by the name of the Khazars, and they take, as we said before, all the J's out and put Y, and in effect, what they're trying to do is promote that same Vatican mentality. They don't
Same
understand that.
confusion, same confusion. You're absolutely correct.
See?
Just another version of the
Yeah.
same confusion.
Exactly, a modern version of the same foolishness. So we need to empower those people with our knowledge that they can stand on their own. And when they
Yeah.
see that foolishness, reject it, right? You cannot be calling God yabba dabba doo. That's not in the King James Version. You cannot be doing all these strange things, hating women and talking about women dressing in pants and all this. And now you're calling God a woman and all that. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So
They,
people
mhm.
need to stand firm. Thank you there, Lucy Smith. Thank you.
Lucy,
Lucy,
yes.
I'm sorry, I keep pronouncing it.
Yes, Lucy Smith, it's okay.
Your donation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Yes.
Yeah, this is really it's really mind blowing when you look at this. The depth of the deception. It is deep,
It's,
it's intricate, and it
yes.
is wonderfully spinned so that you would look at it and think, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice. Oh, look at this version. It's so much more easier. Oh, look at this. Oh, look, it makes it all easy because all the J's have turned to Y, and I could call Yeshua and Yahuwah, Hua, whatever." You know, no, it is taking you away. Remember, first and foremost, the reason why things are happening, the
Right.
reason why the other side is against us, the reason why we are going through what we are going through
Right.
is because the objective of the other side is to stop us
Right.
from serving our gods by any means
It's necessary.
possible,
Yeah.
any means necessary.
Yeah.
They are trying to stop us from serving the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.
And
Remember that. So every time you question yourself, ask yourself, what is the real objective of having another translation? Is the language so complex and so difficult
nope.
that you have to have over 200 translations
Nope.
of the same book? It's
Nope.
like, what is it that you really don't understand? You know, when you really look at it, you have to really question the objective of the other side, the intention of the author. When you read a book, when you read any book, you always want to know, well, I always want to know, what is the real intention of the author?
Right.
What's he trying to do? Is he trying to make money? Is he trying to scare you? What is the real objective? It's the same question that you need to ask yourself. And I'll tell you now, each time they make a new revision, it's going to put money into their pocket.
Oh,
Each
yes.
time a revision is made,
Billions.
there's money in their pocket. And every year there's a new revision, new revised version of the NIV, the AST, all these different acronyms that's out there, right? And
Mhm.
they all go against the God of Israel's words.
It's such a sad situation, and the reason why it is so sad is because they will never tackle this subject head on. They would never go directly. They would always go around and use some measure of social engineering to mess with the minds of the individuals and in order to make their
Exactly.
point. You know, I talked about the situation with the guy last week in Buffalo, and how he killed all these people. And
Mm,
he was 18 years old. I didn't really blame him, even though he's guilty. I blame the people that created this kind of environment, the KKK, the Catholic KKK. And I always remember the fact that, you know, the president of the United States is part of that Catholic system. And he may not, or he may be the KKK, because today you don't know who is KKK because they're not wearing that hooded stuff anymore. They're wearing suits. My point is, why would he take all that time and all that money and go to Buffalo to put a flower under a tree when he could have gone to a school and say to the students of 18 or under, we are the ones responsible. We
mm,
Christians are the ones responsible for this. This
mm,
has nothing to do with the black and white. This has to do with the truth versus the lie. We got the lie, we're trying to promote it. But obviously that's not going to happen. You know, so everybody believes they hate the white man, they do this and all that, they hate the black man, and it makes no sense. So now you put one citizen against another citizen, and the truth is no longer in the mix of it. But we want people not to believe the lie anymore. Think
yeah.
before you act, think before you speak. And when you see situations like this, you know, go and try yourself to understand personally what this whole picture is all about. There is much more. And guess this, the enemy is trying really hard, and the enemy is very good at what they do, but his time is short. I give him
Yep.
just a few more years, and then things will start to change.
Yep. You know, we look at if we look at the timelines of how things happen, and like I said, to me, it is really incredible. There is one thing that we didn't really mention before. When slavery was abolished in 1834, in 1833, guess what was abolished?
Inquisition?
Do you know what was the Inquisition? Exactly. You see how long it took in order for that to actually die down? But
Yes.
as you said, these things are happening under different banners, under different
Yes.
names, under different, pretenses. But the point is, this is how long it took them to realize or to recognize that this thing is not right,
Right.
from a humanity perspective,
Right.
right? But
And
just looking at the timelines, right? You have your 1604, you have your 1611 when the Bible was the King James version of the Bible was actually written. In 2011 was the 400-year anniversary of the King James version of the Bible. And in 2019, as from 1619 to 2019, was the end of the 400 years enslavement of the Israelites,
right.
right?
Right.
And you're looking at that. There is something that is happening there, and nobody can see this. This
Right
is
now, yes.
highly
Hot.
spiritual. This is highly spiritual, what's going on.
Highly spiritual.
Nobody can see this.
You know what is highly spiritual to us, Charmaine? When I think of King James, for example, and of course, the following is people like William Wilberforce. You know, these are men that didn't look like us, but
Yeah,
their bodies were used by the God of Israel to fulfill his purpose, not their purpose. And I find that incredibly wise. I find it incredibly just so wonderful. And now you go to the United States, you have the slaves, and then there's John Brown and Thaddeus Stevens, just to name a few. And they all, again, didn't look like us, but they made the sacrifice for our behalf. It
yeah,
gets me very emotional because then you have, these little people that don't understand what transpired. And
yes.
all they see is the appearance of a black skin or a white skin. That's not the issue. The issue
You
is
know,
truth versus the lie.
I think, Pansy, you have an excellent point.
Yes.
That the tampering of the actual King James version only began in the last, 50 odd, 80 odd years. Prior to that, it was always another version in direct,
Yeah.
conflict,
Yeah.
right? But here there are Bible versions, and I'm going to take the New King James version as our example. Pansy's asked here, could it be that they are trying to remove the Holy Scriptures from the people by watering it down so that in the future it will be a completely new message.
Mhm.
I remember there was a few years ago, maybe about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when everybody started reading their Bible on the tablets. We had tablets, and we had, we had phones, and everybody started to bring it to lessons. And
Yeah.
Elder turned around one day and said, you know what, guys, you can't be doing that. If you're going to read the book, you need to pick up the physical book
Right.
and read it. You pick up the physical book and read it. Don't get lost in this, because the Bible speaks about scrolls and the
Yes.
word, written words. Don't get lost with using these. And the reason why I'm saying that, going to what Pansy is saying, I've taken the New King James Version. Forget all the other version. I tell you now, they are corrupt. If you don't believe me, you can go and do the research. There is a lot of information out there of the difference in the translations. So you can go and you can read it yourself. The reason I've taken the New King James Version of the Bible is because it's supposed to be, I actually thought it was just changing the ye's and the ye's and the these and the thous. I thought that's what all it was doing. But no, it is deeper than that. Guys, you think you're taking a version that's easier to understand? No, it is turning into a different book altogether. There is no reason why the God of Israel's word
Mhm.
cannot be understood in one way. Why do you have to write the God of Israel's word in so many different ways? It's like people saying there are, oh, we all can worship God in our own way. No, our God is not about confusion, just
Right.
one way. But
First of all, Uncle Charmaine, the point I wanted to make before I forget is that the book is not, like I said, a normal book. It's a highly spiritual book. So the only way that you can fully understand it, and when I say fully, most of us don't, but the point is you have to connect with that same spirit. So
right,
just by making a change, the these and the thous or whatever, or even the substance, shows that you are not connected, show that you cannot appreciate what is there, and therefore that
right.
book should be thrown out, burnt,
But
whatever.
it's really unfortunate because some people are innocently just using the New King James Version. As I said, I
Yes.
thought it was just changing the ye's to the you, right? And that's like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. That's not a bad thing to do.
Right.
But when I went into it and started to look, this is what I found. Why are you removing Lord? People can understand what Lord means. I know you can read Lord. I can read Lord. You read. Why you have to remove it?
Yeah.
You're removing God X amount of times. You're removing heaven. Why heaven?
Yeah.
This is not going to help your understanding by removing these words. These are plain English words that everybody understands. Why are you removing it? Repent and hell. I don't know what you're trying to hide. Why are you removing the word damnation? What are you trying to hide? I don't even know what that's been replaced with, or devils even. Why are you removing words like this? It doesn't help. I understand the a man should walketh, and you want to change that to walketh to walk. I
Right.
get that. But why are you removing devils or damnation? We understand what this means. It's not a word that's so old that it's become archaic, right? But the thing that really bothered me was some of the words that were actually changed. For example, it's got, in the New King James Version, it's got his servant Jesus as opposed to his son. It's almost as though there's a demotion there. You're no
Yes.
longer the son, you're the servant. It's like,
Right.
okay, there's a problem there. Anyways, and the one thing that really disturbed me was in Hebrews 4:8, the word Joshua is in place of Jesus. And I'm thinking, hold on a sec. Do you know what Hebrews is about? Hebrews is my absolute favorite book. What are you doing to it? you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
And even when I think about the word comforters being changed from, to helper, I'm thinking about elders' lessons on the comforter. I'm telling you guys, if you ever hear that lesson, whoa, it is a very good lesson.
Yeah.
Anyways, but you change the word to helper, it takes away from, what the comforter, the power of that word. There is power in the word. And we mess with it, we change it, it gives you something different. You can't be talking about Joshua in Hebrews because
See,
Hebrews is a
what people don't understand is, first of all, they had no right to do that because it's a legal document. and you cannot unilaterally make a change to a legal contract between two parties that doesn't include them. So either the God of Israel has to make the change or the Israelite nation has to make the change. And we have to collaborate on that change before it is made. The second thing is it doesn't appeal to them. But having said all of that, I'm impressed with the enemy's effort to try to tear down what the God of Israel has put in place, through using his servants like our elder Shadrach and so on and so forth. This tells me that we in the Israelite nation are on the right track. We are doing what is expected by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And not just that, we are doing it in the face of the most adverse situation. There is nothing worse than slavery or coming out of slavery and have to face your enemy, and the enemy is calling you names and telling you you're not worth anything. But yet we stand firm. We fail or we refuse to submit to his coercion, if you will, submit to his deception. We stand firm on the truth. That gives us power that he can never change. I like that.
You know what? I like when you read the scriptures and you can tell that even our forefathers, when they were going up against these different battles, that they had to stand firm.
Yes.
Stand firm in their grounds. We read Romans 9 all the time, but even Romans 11, has God cast away his people? God forbid. God has not cast away his people. We are here today. And what people are trying to do is remove us from serving him. And this is such a tragedy when you think about it. It's such a tragedy to know that you are being ripped away from the source, ripped away from the God of Israel, but he stands, the contract stands. It's from day one, from Abraham, from Isaac, and from Jacob. It still stands today. And it is written in a way that everyone here can understand. And if not, if you don't understand, go to the Israelite teacher, because the Israelite teacher will teach you about what is actually written in this book. It is about Israel. And
without coming to our Israelite family, you're not going to appreciate, because the book itself contains the mystery of life, and it's hidden in plain sight.
And even, some people will turn around and say, well, God has cast away his people, and, everybody else has been grafted in. But remember, just as, the branches may be cut off, who's to say the branches can't be grafted back in? We read this in the book. We read about this in Ephesians. We can be grafted back in. The other nations are there to move us to jealousy. But it is our duty to worship the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, and keep his laws, his statutes, and his commandments. And
the question begs itself, how did Elder Shadrach get that clear, concise understanding with regards to the restoration of the Israelite nation? And, even in the face of all this adversity, how did he do it? How does his teaching and all his activity make so much sense?
I have to say, I just have to say that, if you are listening to this session today, if you listen to the lesson yesterday, which was fantastic, if you listen to the lesson on Friday with our branch in England, which was fantastic, if you've listened to any of these and you have a degree of understanding, this is a time, as it was said during the lesson yesterday, to give the God of Israel thanks. This is a time for true gratitude. Because this is not given to everybody. Remember, there are a lot of people that hold onto this book and do not know a fraction of what you understand just by listening to the lesson, or even coming back home to the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries. So I would say thank you. And even for you to thank the God of Israel. Put the sevens in the chat, put the comments in the chat, and let your friends know.
And expect the enemy to try to discredit us. Expect him to do that. That is his job. We don't have to buy into it, however, because before they remember this, no stranger can teach us about ourselves. No stranger
No
can
one
be
can
allowed.
teach us about ourselves.
Exactly.
It's
Uh,
actually quite rude if somebody has
yes.
to teach you about you.
It's what I call a neurotic disorder,
It's
because if
rude.
you were trying to teach somebody about their family without knowing who their family is, you've got a psychological problem. You have an inferiority complex. You need to go and get help. So we now can look at these people, recognize that what they're doing is foolishness, and throw it in the garbage. You don't
You
have
know,
to go back and forth with them.
one thing I have to say, and this is how powerful the word is.
Yeah.
Even when our forefathers were not able to read it, they were singing it. They were singing those songs, right? They never read. They could not read. They weren't allowed. Remember, they used to get beat when they read the book. But
Right.
instead of reading it, they sang the songs.
And what did
These
they
were the
call
soul songs.
what
The
did they
soul
call
songs.
those sounds, Officer Charmaine? What did they call them?
Well, they were called Negro spiritual.
Amen. Amen. That's the point I want to say. And
This
this,
was songs for the spirit.
right. Well,
There
that's
were
the point.
songs for the spirit.
But
Remember, they
listen,
were singing about Joshua. They were singing about
right.
Moses.
So why is it that the Catholics call them Negro spirituals, confirming who these people really were?
I'm
And
telling you,
yeah,
it's you guys. Please don't take this for granted. And
yeah,
our forefathers were not singing about Yahushua or Yahweh,
yeah.
or they were singing about those guys. They were singing about the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. They were singing about Ezekiel and the wheel. They were
Yes.
they were singing about this.
And listen,
You know,
I don't want to seem as if we're criticizing them, because I always say if Christianity or Judaism would write their own book, I might even borrow or buy a copy, because you sometimes it doesn't hurt to learn about other people. But
yeah, of
since they
course.
have not done that, they have no right to interfere with our book and accept
Yeah.
that and expect that we would put them as an authority. As a matter of
So
fact,
I
we see them as
yes.
trash.
Yeah, so friends, family, guests, whoever you are that's with us today, just think about those little things,
Yes.
and take your mind out of the drama of the world. Take your mind from there and just think about those things. Why would our forefathers sing these things, right? Did they have to change these words in order to understand what it is that they were singing about? No, they didn't. Why was the book written in a language, you know, in Spanish? You're not going to find like 10 different versions in Spanish, but you have over 200 different versions in English. It's like, is God's word so complicated that you need 200 different versions to tell you the same thing? It
Can't and
can't be the
they
same
can't
thing.
get it.
Different things. There's
Yeah,
different things, completely different. That's why they are there. They're there to confuse you, to take you away from your objective, which is serving the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And I say it all the time. I might sound like a broken record, but this is the ultimate. This is the big deception, the great deception, to
yes,
turn us away from serving our God, to stop us from understanding who we are. We lose our identity. We've lost our identity. But this is a time to reclaim it. And
yes,
you see it through history, time and time again. And you see how the prophecy meets the history, or history meets the prophecy.
right.
We are the people of the book, and we can find ourselves and see ourselves in the King James Version of the Bible.
And we are not going to be held accountable for what the enemy does. The enemy has to do what he does, but we are going to be held accountable for what we do. So again, our focus is on our Father and on his family, and the contribution that we individually or collectively can make. Let us continue to serve the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Let us give him the credit that is due. Let us show him that his choice to call us out of darkness into his marvelous light will not be in vain. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you,
Thank
Officer Charmaine, for
you.
coming to this extravagant and beautiful opportunity to share with the world this wisdom. And I thank the God of Israel and Elder Shadrach for sharing that with us as well.
And our moderator.
Yes,
Peace.
Christendo, thank you.